Assalamu alaikum. Right, let's try and get this resolved. Sorry everybody, some serious technical difficulties with logging in, and let me just try and get this balanced. Tried about 4 different apps and laptops to try and get this working, but we're here now. So apologies, I'm going to have to check on my phone as well to make sure we're all good. I think we are. So let me just hang on for a minute or two, because obviously we started a bit late. I'll give it 2 minutes, guys. Sorry, just so that we can allow people who've been trying to get in to get in. Oops, I've not used YouTube Live before, so I'm trying to just navigate around it as well. Okay, let's get started, guys. Right. So thanks for joining. A couple of people have asked us to wait, so let's give it 2 minutes then. What time is it? So if we wait till 20 past, it's 17 past now, and then we'll go on a little bit after 9, if that's okay for people. Let me know. Okay, so we're starting 2 minutes, 20 past, and then if we need additional time, then we'll go on a little bit past 9 o'clock. Let me just go and turn that light off. Let me put this on charge. Wa alaikum salam. Got some hoodlums joining us today. Okay guys, let's get started. It's 20 past, as I said. If you've just joined, apologies for the lateness of this. Just had some technical difficulties getting this set up using YouTube Live for the first time. So welcome. We are going to cover some points around ways to approach schooling at home. Thank you to the guys at ASCC for inviting us to do this. Um, the background to it really is quite straightforward. Obviously, people have found themselves in a situation through no fault of their own over the last month or so where schools have closed. They've been thrown into a situation where their kids are now at home. There's been no real thought about how that would last, how long it's going to last, what kind of stuff that they're going to do over a period of time. So, in discussing with Nisar, some of the other guys at ASCC, and actually through people at work as well, the need or the desire for people to understand a little bit better how to manage dealing with children at home and everything else that's going on in their lives at the moment was simply quite a pressing topic, because it's really thrown people quite considerably into a very different way of working, of living. So my background is that my wife and I have home educated our son, who's 11 now, for probably about the last 6 years or so. And I want to just make clear that home education, when you choose to do it, is not the same at all as the situation that most people find themselves in now. You might think it's an unnecessary distinction, but actually when we go through some of the resources, you'll see that it isn't. But the main thing to say about that is that if you home educate and you've been doing it for a while, you've chosen to do it, you've had time to prepare the resources, you've had time to prepare mentally, you've organised your house, other people around you might support you, whereas in this situation where people have been thrown into it, none of that really exists. So although end result is the same of kids being at home and parents having to look after them and deal with the learning, the method in which it's done is totally different. So so those are the basic reasons I think that we've approached this. And sorry, I was just mentioning a little bit about my background. So obviously home educated for a number of years. I also have a bit of a background in sports coaching, working at an elite level for a number of years across some professional organisations with children, mainly between the ages of 9 to 13, but actually a little bit, 9 to 8 to 11, but also extending a little bit younger and a little bit older. So I did that for about 3.5 years. I still work within coaching, but now really do older boys, so 18 plus. And the reason that that's important is because the way in which coaching works, particularly in elite levels, is that it resembles quite strongly the way in which teaching happens. Not entirely, but the approach around child development is very similar. So it gives a very good insight into approaches to teaching, to how children develop. Okay, so sorry, I just had a request to clean the camera. I think there's a problem with that because there's a issue on the protective layer. Okay, so sorry if it's a bit cloudy. It's not my phone, so don't blame me. All right. Okay, so for the purpose of this, the things that we're going to go through are 5 things. Okay, so we're going to cover expectations, planning and structure, communication, resources and practical areas, and then we'll do something on Q&A at the end. I've already had some questions come through, so I will try within the next half an hour or so to cover most of the items that have come up within those questions, but if there's specific things at the end, then please put those through. Okay, so those things are expectations, planning and structure, communication, resources, and practical suggestions. All right, so make sure that you've got a pen and some paper to note stuff down. Normally I much prefer to do things which are interactive, but for the purpose of this, we're setting this up for the first time. We thought it might be better just to do it in this one directional way. Okay, so those are the 5 areas. Before we go through those, there's 3 or 4 things that I want everybody to think about, to note them down. Doesn't have to be word for word, but just the ideas. Note them down, and I want you to bear these things in mind as we go through. Okay, and these are things to consider as themes all the way through. Okay, so first one is a quote from an ancient Chinese army general, Sun Tzu, who said, in the midst of chaos, there's opportunity. All right, in the midst of chaos, there's opportunity. The second thing is that whatever you planned for, whatever you thought this was going to be like, however long we're going to be in this situation, all of our lives are now different. Okay, they're all different. That's not in our control to change. Don't expect your life as it is right now, with the kids at home, with other people, working from home, inability to get out. Don't expect that to be as it was before while we're in this period, okay? So your life is different. You have to accept that. So that's the second thing. The third thing to consider all the way through is what schools do and how they do it, that can't be replicated in your house. Okay, unless you have a giant house with lots of resources, that cannot be replicated in your house. So that's the fourth thing. And then the fifth thing is a question, and one to think about all the way through and afterwards, is how would you like your children to see you? Yeah, how would you like your children to see you? So the first one is the quote. Sorry, it's 4 things. The first one is a quote from Sun Tzu: in the midst of chaos, there's opportunity. The second one, your life is now different. Don't expect it to be as it was before. The third one, school can't be replicated at home. And the fourth one, how would you like your children to see you? Okay. So, on expectations then, don't compare yourself to school. Don't compare yourself to teachers, because it isn't possible to replicate what school is doing. And it's very unlikely that unless you've had specific training or you understand things extraordinarily quickly and very easily, that you're going to have the ability to do what teachers do. Okay? Now, I'm going to say something here which people will have taken the wrong way, and I don't mean this as a disrespect to teachers, but the way in which teachers train is to manage classrooms, so anywhere between 20 to 35 kids. Okay, so you don't have to compare yourself to teachers in schools because you're not working in the same situation. The fact that you don't have teacher training doesn't necessarily put you in a bad position. Okay, it doesn't necessarily put you in a position where you cannot make things work. Okay, so don't compare yourself to school, don't compare yourself to teachers. All right, because it's not constructive. It doesn't help you. What do you want and what do you need personally, not your family, you personally? What do you want and what do you need in this period? Okay, as an expectation. Because you need to write these things down, or you need to make some note of it, even if it's to yourself, a mental note to yourself, that actually you need to have a bit of time, you need a bit of support, you need some help. Okay, that's for yourself. But what about what you want for the other people around you? Okay, so for your children and for the other people that are in your house. All right, so a lot of this is going to be a little bit general because I don't know the specifics of everybody that's on this video today. Okay, so what do you need and what do you want for yourself? What do others in your house who are dependent on you need and want? Okay, and then conversely, what is it that so what do you want for yourself? What do you want for the other people in your house? Okay, so those are all about you, for yourself, and then for the other people in your house. But what about those other people in the house? So however many children you've got, whether you live with your husband, your wife, in-laws, other dependents, whoever else it might be, what is it that they want and what is it that they need? Okay, because we build up a sense of expectation around academics on its own. All right, you build up a sense of expectation around what needs to be done in the house. You build up a sense of expectation around going out, who's going to do work, okay? And sometimes these things are unsaid, and when they're unsaid, they build up. Okay, so everybody needs to be clear about what their expectations are. So we'll come to how we might approach that within the planning. All right. So within those expectations, you'll find that children, particularly young children, will not communicate their expectations clearly through verbal articulation, okay, because they can't. They don't know how to do it. They don't have the words. They don't have the vocabulary. They sometimes don't have the confidence, and they don't know how to approach the subjects that they want dealing with. Okay, so what happens with children, especially young children, but it happens across most ages, is that they begin to display their expectations through changed behaviors. Okay, so bear in mind that most most adults have built up some resilience to change, to being put into difficult situations, okay, through their own life experience, whether it's through work, personally, or anything else. All right. So children generally haven't had that experience and therefore don't know how to deal with things which are new or things which they have no parallel or equivalent experience of. So they manifest uh, uh, their their fears, all of their emotions through their behaviours. Okay, and it's important for us as parents to be able to recognise what the triggers for their behaviours, but also what their behaviours are actually showing. Because anger can manifest itself in different ways. It can manifest in fighting, which is a clear one. It could manifest as crying. It could manifest as withdrawal. All right, so when we said at the beginning, in chaos there's opportunity, this is an opportunity for parents to get closer to their children, to understand this is what my child is like. You know, this is who they are. This is his character. This is his personality. This is what he likes. All right. So all of that we can sort of encompass within expectations. All right. So within that, how do we help to manage those expectations? Well, structure is definitely a big part of that. Okay, so communicating what you want, what you need, and then others to do the same. So if we move into structure and planning, structure is basically your biggest ally. Okay, so whatever else is happening in the world, all right, the one thing that you've got some control over is what happens in your house. Now, whether you've got one child or five, whether you've got lots of dependents or none, okay, you still have some degree of influence around what happens on a daily basis. All right. So whether it's you on your own as a parent or whether it's you with other people who you need to confer with, make structure your biggest thing. All right. In the immediate period. Now, this might take you a few days to work out, you know, what is it that we need to do? How are we going to do it? How's the best way of doing it? All right. It might take you a couple of days to do it, in which time, like, everything else feels a bit chaotic because there isn't the routine that you normally have. There isn't, people aren't doing all of the things that you would like them to be doing, but it's short term. All right. So investing in your structure and your planning is really, really important, however chaotic it might feel for the first couple of days. All right. So in order to get stuff done, in order for people to be happier with what's going on, because remember, people aren't going to be happy. Their lives have also changed. So it's not just mine, it's not just yours. Everybody's life has changed. So having a structure is key, but it doesn't guarantee success. Okay, but I'm pretty sure that if you don't have a structure, everything will be miserable, and there'll be a lot of arguments and discontent within the house. All right. If you're someone that doesn't have much routine, okay, you do things on the fly because that works for you, you need to develop one, not for your sake so much, but for everybody else's, because most people work within a sense of routine, however loose it might be. All right. So develop one. No one is going to do this for you. So if you're the head of the household, whatever that is, whether it's as the mother, the father, whoever it is, all right, you need to work with people, uh, all of the other key people who are going to help you to develop that and to implement it. All right. Now I've pushed the structure thing quite hard because I that's how I work. All right, and without that, I'm really not very good. I don't like to do a lot of stuff on the fly or to improvise a great deal, except in particular situations. All right, but at the same time, whilst I'm saying that that's really important, it's also important to recognize that the structure is not absolute. Okay, so set it up, see how it works, not within a day, but over a week. Okay, over a week. See how it works over a week. And then at the end of the week, look at what has worked and what hasn't. And then think about whether or not there's elements that the reasons that it hasn't worked or it could be better, are they in your control? If yes, then refine it. Work with whoever you're working with to refine it and say, okay, next week we know that, you know, the academic side was good, but maybe the screen time wasn't so good. So let's try and refine that. Okay. Make sure that you do it over a week's basis because everyone has good days, everyone has bad days, and your first day might be bad, all right, or it might be brilliant, and you might think, I've sussed it, all right. I guarantee you haven't, because something will happen, and then the next day will, or somewhere along the week, it won't work out very well. Okay. So, how do you go about doing that? So, we use a number of different tools to help us do it. Here's one, just a small whiteboard. I don't know if you can see that. It's just a week planner. Okay, so we just fill that in at the beginning of every week. We write our names somewhere. Where do we write it? On the far side here, right down here, and then by day and time, we have a broad sense what we're doing every day. So we typically do that every Sunday evening. Okay, so Sunday evenings I don't go out, I don't speak to people because if I don't get that right, my whole week is messed up. All right, that's you can call me like OCD. I don't care. That's how I have to work because otherwise, lots of things go wrong and nobody's very happy. All right, so that's one thing that you can use. Obviously, have a month planner. You can break it down into hours. You can be a little bit looser with it if you need to. Just do morning, afternoon, however that works best for you. All right. Set objectives for the week as opposed to a day. Okay. So when you start to do the teaching for your kids, if you know that they've got maths, English, geography, history to do in a week, okay, space those things out over the week so that if you have a day where it's really bad, they don't get anything done, okay, it's not that that's good, but you've got time to catch up over the rest of the week to make sure that that gets done. Okay, so if you set it simply by day, then you'll always have these massive fluctuations and you don't give yourself room for anomalies to crop up, for things to happen like emergencies, whatever they might be, or just somebody's ill. You know, illness when you're at home and you're in charge of sorting all this out has a massive impact. All right. In terms of structuring individual days, to give you an example, we try to get all of uh, the academic formal work done in the early part of the day, because typically children work better with the academic side of stuff earlier on. So we try and finish that by 2. Tend to find that after about 3, there's really the type of engagement you get is much poorer. It takes longer to do the work. There's reluctance to do the work. So again, that can be a little bit of trial and error because people might not get up very early. You have to think about the rhythms of your own life as well. What is it that you're accustomed to doing, and how much are you going to change? So that means that the rest of the day, um, there might be the opportunity to spend time playing, okay, or on the screen. So whether it's indoor or outdoor, that's really up to how you construct your own time, but also the sort of resources that you might have. So whether you're in a small flat, totally changes how you might approach stuff to if you're in a big house and you have a large garden. So I would certainly suggest that if people get if kids get their work done well and quickly, then allow them that time to do other things. Okay, things that they would like to do, and not just things that you think that they should be doing. So things that we think that they like or think that they should be doing comes back into the idea around expectations. What is it that we want for them? All right. So young children in particular do very well with um, with learning through play or informal settings. All right. It doesn't mean that they can just go and do whatever they want. Try and structure your play in a way that they can pick things up. Um, the other thing within structure is when you're at home, everything that you do is potentially an opportunity for learning. Okay, not in the formal sense of sitting down with a textbook or sitting down at a screen and learning um, off a website or an online tutor, but through everything that you do. So whether it's cooking, whether it's cleaning, whether it's you've got to do your tax return because it's that time of year, um, all of those things are opportunities for learning. Okay, and those are real world opportunities. So a lot of stuff that gets done in school uh, it is abstracted. It's difficult to relate it to what human experiences are really like. So use the things that you do every day as an opportunity to teach. So I mentioned this the other day. Cooking, for example, is a very good one, and it can be used for lots of different types of learning. So if you think about when you bake a cake, you've got to take measurements, right? You've got to have precision in what you do. So there's dexterity, there's motor skills. So for young children who are trying to learn motor skills, it's really good. Maths you can bring in because you need to measure. You've got ratios. You can think about if you're baking the chemical reaction between foods, like why does bread rise? What properties does yeast have that makes it rise? Or you could turn it into some sort of um, geography or sort of history lesson to do with the ingredients. So, uh, where do ingredients come from? How do they get from all over the world to here? Who discovered them? Who was the first person to bring things across from uh, southern Africa or India or Australia? How is it that we have foods available to us that don't grow here? Okay, so all of those things are potentially learning opportunities. All right. A little thing on child development. I wasn't going to say a lot about this, but if you think about how schools are structured, it mirrors a philosophy around the developmental phases of children. Okay, so primary school is up to 7. So you've got preschool or no school, kindergarten, and then primary. Okay, up to 7 years old. Then from 7 to 11, you've got junior school, or I don't know what it's called now, middle school. Okay, and then from 11 to 16 or so, you've got senior school. All right, so those phases from 0 to 7, 7 to 11, 11 plus, those phases are well recognized uh, developmental phases for children. Okay, and within the Quran, for example, there's talk about this. So from up to 7, from 7 till 10. Okay, so at 10, it's obligated for a child to start to pray. Even if they're not baligh, they need to start praying from 10. So that's an indication of what's happening with them cognitively. There's changes that happen with them, what they're mentally able to digest, what they're thinking about, and what they're able to articulate. And then from 11, 10 or 11, up to puberty. So again, there's that cognitive change which happens again at puberty, and it's so while schools have this slightly arbitrary grouping of 11 to 16, we know that puberty happens at different ages, and it happens differently within boys and girls. So girls typically mature physically and emotionally quicker than boys. All right, that's known across time and place. So uh, girls will typically have their puberty phase somewhere between 11 and 14, and boys will be a couple of years later. Okay, so up to 16, 17. Generally doesn't go beyond 16, but it does, and girls it can happen earlier. There's a number of cases around it. Why is that important? Because I don't know the ages of the children that you're all dealing with, but each of those phases requires different sort of interventions, different types of actions. Before 7, children respond extremely well to play and informal learning, extremely well. Okay, but it needs to be set up in a good way. All right. Between 7 and 11, they still do the same. Okay, but they have the capacity now to start to form a little bit more in terms of um, a little bit more from abstract thinking. Okay, um, before 7, they really struggle with that. Everything has to be very concrete. They can't think about hypothetical situations very well. They do come up with it. They do throw questions out to you sometimes about, oh, what would happen if a shark met a lion? Who would win? Right? That's a typical sort of 6 or 7-year-old question. All right. So it means that you can change the types of interventions. Sorry, using sort of teaching jargon. The types of things that you do with kids at each of these phases. But part of this is about you recognizing again, where am I? What am I good at? How can I engage with my child better? What kind of phase is he in? What does he like doing? And particularly for young children, there's a phrase that you might hear quite a lot if you're doing any reading about this, or if you go online, around child-led learning. That doesn't mean whatever the child wants to do, you let them do. Okay, there is a school of thought that says, actually, yeah, that's brilliant, but that's quite extreme, and I don't subscribe to it. What it means for me is that the subject areas and the types of play that the child inclines towards are things that they have a natural disposition to, because they haven't learned that generally. Okay, so I know that we live in a slightly strange time around sort of gender roles and stuff, but boys typically, if left alone, and there's experiments and research around this, where boys, if they're left alone, they will typically go and gravitate towards playing with things like sticks and toy guns and toy cars. And girls will typically go towards playing with things like dolls or making things with softer objects. Okay, and that's not my bias. You can go online, you can research, you can look up research that's done around this. There are exceptions, absolutely. I know lots of people who, females who grew up and they were tomboys. They loved everything to do with that boys typically are associated with, but as they got older, they became much more feminine and very, very strongly feminine, interestingly. Okay, so that's just a little bit about the phases of child development, and just to help you think about the types of things that children might that you might be able to engage with your child better depending on where they are within that sort of developmental phase. So 0 to 7, 7 to 11, 11 to 14, or sort of puberty area. Okay, so just to finish off in terms of structure, allow yourself to, if things don't go right immediately, it doesn't matter. Allow yourself the opportunity to correct. Allow yourself the opportunity to fail in terms of things not going ideally to plan. But if you don't have a plan, you've got nothing to benchmark against. You've got no way of refining and improving. Okay, so allow yourself that space. Build into your schedule downtime for yourself and for dependents. Okay, so if you're working with your spouse, make sure that you're the one recommending to them that they have space on their own, where they're not working, where they're not doing anything, whether it's their day job, whether it's working with the kids. Give them that space, because when you're busy, it's quite easy to become, find it hard to switch off at certain with certain things, and I will beat myself. I've better now, but I used to beat myself up quite a lot about not getting stuff done within a day or across a week. And through reflection and talking, I realised actually I just need to be honest with myself about what's feasible for me, and to allow myself the space to sort of breathe, to reflect for myself, to go away and do something. So if your husband or wife is really overwhelmed or stressed, don't push them even harder, because that will come back to you in any case, whether they get ill, whether they take it out on you. All right, important that you work together. So if you can see that they're becoming like really busy, stressed, whatever it is, you will know the triggers better uh, uh, in a husband and wife relationship than anybody else. All right, so recognize what those are, build that time in. It might have to be improvised depending on how the week's gone, but otherwise just pick a time on a day and just say that's your time. No one disturbs you in that time. All right, and do make sure that you get the same thing for yourself. If you want to go off and watch, I don't know, binge watch a season on Netflix of something, how you spend that time is up to you. Just make sure that you use that time constructively. Within the structure, just try and make sure that you give yourself the time to um, do things together. Okay, so your whole life has been changed around. All right, your kids perhaps don't they don't like it. They don't respect all of the things that you're trying to do. So within the structure, have the conversation with them. When you're setting this up, have the conversation with them. Maybe suggest to them that, or a way of doing it is to say, right, on a Monday, these are all the things that we're going to do. Allow them to choose the order. Okay, so it gives them a sense of, I'm in control. I'm getting to choose these things. All right. So long as they are able to get the things done well, no problem. Okay. If your day ends up being extended because not everything fits in the morning, it's not a problem. Remember, going back to your life is different now. If it means that you have to get up a bit earlier to prep stuff, it's worthwhile doing, because if the consequence of not getting up early is that everyone gets stressed, that's not a good outcome for anybody. Okay, so if you have to go to bed later, wake up earlier to make sure stuff is done, it's a worthwhile sacrifice, particularly in the short term. If you're working at home, it might be that you have to work earlier. Okay, so if you're used to going into the office for like 9:30, think about, actually, if I get up earlier, get a couple of hours work done now, I can play with the kids, I can set up their work, I can be with them one to one between 10 and 12. All right, and then everyone has lunch. Okay, if you're working with someone else, think about how you balance those things out. Think about the skills that you have and that your partner or other people in your family have. Um, so that if you're not good at maths, for example, is someone else. Okay, look at where the skills are and balance your time around what resources that you have. Okay, doing things together, there's lots of stuff that you can do together. So physical activities, if you're someone that's into martial arts or sports, if you have a garden, get out every day. The weather's been really fantastic, so it's helped in one sense in terms of being active, but clearly some people have taken it too far. I saw someone having a barbecue earlier on this week with lots of people around them in a park. Meal times, I think it's probably too much to expect everybody to want to sit down together at every meal time, but try and get one meal a day together, and then maybe that's a time to reflect and say, what's gone well, and what hasn't, with the whole family. Okay, because it's really important that within, going back to the expectations and the planning, the structuring, the refining, is that you get a sense of what happens between everybody. All right. And sorry, I meant to mention that within allowing people space, it's not just for you and your spouse, but do it for the kids as well, because they will need it. All right, so if you've got lots of kids, just give them an opportunity, whether it's one-to-one with you or whether you allow them just a time on their own to go off and do their own thing. It's important to do it. And we always try to end the day doing something relaxed or something fun. Okay, so it might be a board game. We might just even play something like Hangman. Um, but we try and do it together and wind down. No screens, no screens, no gaming, no phone calls, nothing like that, because it's a stimulus. Okay, so if you're on a screen late, particularly young children, they will not sleep. And if they don't sleep, you're going to have a problem the next day. And that becomes compounded the more that you do it. Someone asked a question about screen time and how you manage that. So people have varied views around um, whether games and interaction online and then or offline but using a screen is good. I've got a particular view about it, but I recognise that everyone is in a different situation. So we typically don't use screens or online stuff for teaching, but there is a lot of resource there. So you can use it for that. And that's constructive. Allowing them time to play, whether it's games online, whatever you permit them, okay, those are things that you have to review. Whatever your boundaries are around that, you have to set those boundaries and set them strongly, okay? But have that communication about why and when. If they're going to do it, okay, maybe build in a time in the day where they can do it, as I said, not late evening. And if they want more time, if they've completed their work, if they've completed household chores, that's something that you can think about. Use it as a reward or as an incentive for them to do the stuff that they need to be doing. I see that there's quite a big dependence on phones, tablets, and screens right now. That's difficult. That is definitely difficult, especially if kids have got their own phone and they're accustomed to using it a lot. So you might have a week or a few days of establishing boundaries where they can't do it. So, maybe put everyone's phone together for a period of the day, maybe the whole morning where everyone works. That won't be popular, okay, but it's a way of being able to manage everything that happens at home. Um, Last thing on structure, I mentioned that everything that happens within the your daily routine is an opportunity for learning, but make sure that everybody chips in with stuff around the house. So whatever the tasks are, no one's going to like it. Hoovering, cleaning, I don't like it, but it needs to be done for the sanity of everybody in the house. Stuff has to go in the right place. Um, so build that into their daily routine. Okay, so whatever it might be, everybody needs to work towards keeping the household in order. It just because mum or dad has always done it, now that everyone's at home, it doesn't mean that they continue with those same roles. We don't have those same roles anymore. Okay. So I've kind of covered quite a lot through planning and structure right there. Let me just check on questions if there's anything specific around that. So a couple of questions around that. How can we remain consistent in following a timetable? So the timetable's there for you to understand, to set out your expectations for yourself and for everybody else. So it's really important that if you're going to set it out, you do what you say you're going to do for yourself. Because there's a big problem with inconsistency in between saying what you're going to do and doing it. All right, and kids pick up on that extremely quickly, even young children. They might not articulate it, but they understand it. You say you're going to do something and you don't do it, that's a problem. Okay, so only commit to things that you know that you're going to be able to do and that you can do consistently. All right, and then you have an approach that you can roll out with other people. Also, really important that for the parents or whoever's implementing this, is that they have a view. It's two separate people, but they come together and they have a unified view, so that kids can't go and play one off against the other. So you two might need to spend a bit of time together to think about what are the boundaries, why are we setting them, what is one person going to implement, what's the other person going to implement or see over. All right. Sorry, let me just go back to that question. So don't. The biggest problem in being consistent with the timetable is not setting yourself unrealistic expectations. Okay, because if you set yourself like heroic expectations that, you know, this week they're going to memorize this much Quran, they're going to do this much maths, they're going to do whatever else, they're going to clean the whole house top to bottom, you know, they're going to reorganize the garage, which hasn't seen anybody in there for 6 months except for people to throw stuff in. It won't happen, all right? And then when it breaks down on day one, you feel downbeaten by it. So really important to have expectations which are realistic. Okay, and that's why the process of refining the structure and the planning is important every week, because you will get to see in this new way of living what it is that's feasible for you individually and for the kids. All right. So sorry, I think there was another question there. Catering for children for different abilities and backgrounds, do you think a certain degree of structured planning, such as set times, etc., helps manage structure and goals? Yes, it definitely does help. It doesn't matter how many children that you have, because this again is about having your expectations clearly articulated, and so that they have a sense of what they understand what's needed from them. If it doesn't work, then that's part of the process of refinement. So if you've got older children, and by that I mean sort of teens and above, part of what can be given to them is some responsibility for managing the younger ones, and that takes some burden away from you, also gives them a degree of ownership around managing things within the house. It gives them confidence in themselves. It shows that you trust them to do it. So this is really important as well, is that academic learning simply on its own doesn't necessarily help to build character and relationships. Okay, so a lot of the stuff that you do in the house with your children now will be about developing a relationship. So how do you communicate things like trust? It's by giving them tasks that they haven't done before, that they're not accustomed to. All right, so you can get older children to help with younger children, so long as you can see that they're capable of doing it. But definitely, in terms of the base point of the question about, do I think that the structured planning helps? Absolutely. I don't know how. I think it would be easier to freestyle with one child than it would be with 3 or 4. Okay, and once you get into a routine and a habit of doing it, then you'll know what you can freestyle and improvise with. But in this period, think about this period as an adjustment period. All right, so you're adjusting from pre-COVID life to COVID life. All right, that adjustment is going to be painful, not just for you, but for everybody. All right, so the quicker that you can get a new habit and a new structure for yourself, for everybody else, whether people like it or not, okay, once it starts becoming familiar, people will start to think, okay, I know I've got to do this, I know I've got to do that, my mum likes this, my brother doesn't like that, I know all of those things. This is the area in which I've got free space, this is the area in which I can move. All right, but you can't have that free space and freedom to move without some degree of structure in the first place. Okay, so spend quite a lot of time on planning and communication, planning and structure, because that is actually the biggest part of what I'm proposing as a way of saving your own sanity. The other thing, which is the other area, which I think is a really big one, an important one, and I think is tremendously understated, is communication. All right, so you can have a brilliant plan, a brilliant structure, foolproof. All right, to the extent that plans and structures can be foolproof. But if you do not communicate this well to other people, it won't work. All right, so the best planning and the best structure will fall down if it's not well communicated. And that is a two-way process. So you need to get other people's involvement into your planning structure. So if it's just you and your spouse, that's relatively straightforward. The more people that you have in the house, the more people that you have who are dependent on you, the more complicated it becomes. But it isn't necessarily hard. Think about the skills that you might have at work. If you manage people, it's a similar type of relationship. All right, you need to understand where they're coming from in order to get the best out of them. All right, most of us will have line management experience, or even if you work with other people, there might be people that you really dislike. Uh, there's plenty of those people in my experience, but you've still got to work with them. So how do you find a way to work with them on a daily basis where you're not just knocking heads, but you're actually coming together and you can get stuff done? Because they're part of your team, whether you like them or not, whether they like you or not, whether you've got similar interests or not. Okay, so have those discussions, all right, early, and say, this is what we're going to do, this is why we're doing it, what do you think of this? Be open to things that you didn't think about before, all right? Be open to receiving feedback from your children. Parents are really bad at taking advice from their children or suggestions from their children. Sorry, I just noticed the time. We've gone past 9 because we started late. So I just wanted to check that people are okay with that. I will try to wrap up in the next sort of 5 or 6 minutes, because I know that it's late and people have got stuff to do. I'll just wait for anyone to respond. So if you don't have good relationships with people within your family, and there's plenty of families that have that, now is the time to get rid of whatever bad blood there is, because in order for you to keep your sanity, if there's lots of people in your house, you need to have people involved. Okay, and if you're the master of the house, whatever role that you have to think about how do you facilitate other people getting on. All right, so whether it's about giving them particular time, whether it's about having specific talks with them, whether it's about allowing them things that you wouldn't have otherwise allowed them, then please do consider that. Okay, so we'll try and just reading a couple of quotes back. If we wrap up in the next sort of 7-8 minutes. In terms of resources then, and practical areas, excuse me while I just look at some notes. I wrote down quite a lot of stuff earlier because I was thinking about it. So I mentioned earlier that the everything that happens in your life now is a potential learning opportunity. So everything in the house has educational value. Your relationships have value. If children see fighting and arguing all the time, that's what they will start to consider as normal. If they see working together, harmoniousness, affection, that's what they will consider as normal. So someone asked a question around, how do we inculcate things around Dean? This is the time. All right, so someone quoted to me recently, I don't remember where it's from, but said that basically children are like they're like your teachers, because they show back to you the values and the behaviours that you display to them, and they do it without any sort of fear. All right, they'll just come out and say, I heard it the other day. Oh, that guy's really fat. All right, or you lie in all the time. All right, I heard these things with my own ears, that children will come out and say those things. So if you display particular types of behaviours and characteristics, they will take that on, they will see it. All right, so it's really a good time for introspection. Going back to the point that we mentioned right at the beginning, how would you like your children to see you? Think about the values and the behaviours that you display to them. They'll display it back. Okay, so within your household, what you do, the opportunities that you have, there are lots. It takes a bit of imagination, it takes a bit of thinking, and a bit of planning, which I will forever go back to. So here are some things that I thought about, and these just came to me today, like in the hour before this video. These are things that came to me today. So there are loads, and these aren't exclusive. These aren't my only things these aren't the only things that you could could do. But for example, I was out in the garden. I'm rubbish at gardening. I don't know anything about gardening. But it suddenly dawned on me, according to a friend of mine, that March to July is the ideal time to garden, to plant stuff. I was thinking, that's fantastic. I don't know anything about gardening. Can you invest time in yourself in order to teach your children about stuff they need to learn? Think about that. Right, I don't know about gardening. One of my wife's friends is brilliant with it. Plants loads of stuff, knows how to rear stuff, knows about plant life cycles. I don't. So think about the, if people know that in your family, think about how you might use them to help children learn about that. If you can get children to engage with that, that is much better than going through a biology text about photosynthesis, chlorophyll development. They get to see it for real. This is how a plant grows. You plant a seed, you water it, it starts to grow. What does it need? Oxygen, light, water. It's got all of those. Where are they coming from? That is a lesson. That is a fantastic lesson. Okay, so gardening is something that I need to look into quite urgently. I was out there cleaning and weeding today. Hated it, but there you go. Still need to just get on and do it. DIY is another thing. If you're not very good at plumbing, electrics, carpentry, plenty of stuff online. Look at that stuff, all right? If you can understand how the plumbing in your house works, that is massive physics lessons. Okay, lots of physics lessons, and they develop. Children will develop physical skills, practical skills through doing it. Okay, and you don't. Plumbing and electrics are much harder in your thinking than they really are. So I don't know much about gardening. I know a bit about plumbing and electrics. Okay, the heating system, the water system, where does it come from? How does it get to your house? How does a toilet work? If you understand how a toilet works, as bizarre as it sounds, there is a huge physics lesson in that. Okay, look at how a cistern inside, how the pump inside the cistern works. Okay, why doesn't a toilet smell? Right, considering all of the business that goes down there, why doesn't it smell? There's a reason for that. Electrics is the same. If you can understand like how stuff is wired in your house, ring circuits, closed circuits, all of that stuff, really, really good. Practical stuff for boys in particular, they will really appreciate being able to do that. And think about that. If you can teach those things well, they don't have a dependence later on in life for small household jobs on anyone else. Okay, I had to learn a lot of this stuff as an adult. I didn't know it as a child. All right, why? One, because school didn't teach me, no one else taught me. But these are practical, invaluable skills that you can do very quickly, very easily. Car mechanics, all right. If you don't, again, I don't know much about cars, but I know enough to keep my car sort of running. Those are really good things that you can work on. What did I touch on? So electrics, plumbing, car, DIY in general. So if you know stuff about carpentry, if you know how to use carpentry tools, the precision that you need in carpentry is to be a good carpenter is fantastic. Okay, you teach dexterity, you teach motor skills, fine motor skills, not just rubbish ones. Build something small. My son recently was on a workshop. He built a small insect hotel. So they put all of these bits. It was all the stuff was given to them. They just had to glue it together. They didn't really have to saw very much. But you can find a lot of these projects online, and they can have practical application. The typical one that we always got taught in the past was about making a spice rack. I don't have one anymore. Mine broke many years ago because I wasn't very good at making those things. But those are all very good practical lessons and things that you can do with the children. Okay, so this thing about working with your kids is really important, because going back to the question about who do you want them, how do you want your children to see you? Do you want them to see you as someone who's practical, who's helpful, who has skills that can teach them things, or are you just someone that gives them some money to go off somewhere else? Okay, so that's an extreme. That's what some people do. All right, so the children don't develop a connection because parents don't invest time with them in things that are meaningful. All right, take on board the things that they like to do as well. So if you're going to go and teach them about plumbing, toilets, and stuff like that, they might not like it, but it's useful. So trade it with something that they like to do. Dad, I want to go out and play football. All right, no problem. All right, imagine you don't like football, um, but we'll go out and we'll do it. Okay, so um, cooking I mentioned earlier. Bath time's also a really good one for physics. Um, recycling, lots of stuff that gets thrown away, you can use it to build things out of scrap. Make funny puppets, make monsters, make robots. All right, doesn't matter if it doesn't look great. Doesn't matter at all. Just use it, okay, to make things. Even make a puppet show. I've done it out of old loo rolls. Okay, it looks ridiculous, but it keeps young children really, really occupied. Um, so that's kind of resources and practical areas in a nutshell. I realised you could spend an awful lot of time on this. I would definitely spend more time with kids in stories. Storytelling is underrated as well. So whether that's you memorising stuff and teaching that and telling it from memory, or if you read stuff from a book, really, really valuable to do. Okay, there are a number of books online which advise around good books to use as well. The name of the one that I read recently has escaped me. And use a lot of board games, so those can also be educational. So something typical like Scrabble, but there are logic games as well. Make it into a challenge. Let me just go back to the questions quickly before we wrap up. I think we've covered most of these. So different age children, I think we covered in terms of, without knowing the specifics of their ages and their kind of their inclinations is difficult, but do look at their inclinations, what they incline towards. Again, set out their expectations around the time for the day, and allow them time to go off and play and experiment with stuff safely on their own. If you've got a garden, great, just to allow them to go out and play. If you haven't, then things within the house which are safe. Potentially set up a play area where they can make it as messy as they want, so long as the mess stays in that area. Okay, anything outside of that, not acceptable. That's your boundary. In that area, they can do whatever they want. All right, so long as it's, permissible for them to do it and it's safe. And then last question: what do you do when your child has a short attention span? Think about the things. Thank you. Just getting water. Think about the things that they like to do. Okay. What are they inclined towards, and invest your time thinking about what they would like to do, so that you can use those things as a trade to sort of say, well, we did some of this, or if you've done your work, let's go and do a bit of this. Maybe I don't know exactly what a short attention span means, but if they can only if they're young and can only sit down for 15 minutes, give them 15 minutes, right, for a couple of days. 15 minutes, break, let them go and play. Come back, 15 minutes again. The next day, move it up a bit, 20 minutes. Okay, see how they respond to that. All right, but do think about things like diet. All right, sugar intake is a big problem for people, and how you plan when they eat, not just what they eat. I hope that's been useful. I appreciate that started a little bit late, and it's difficult to judge people's reactions and engagement when it's one way, but please do send messages through to Nisar or ASCC if there's additional stuff that we can cover. We did think about doing a separate workshop for this, which will be more practically oriented, and dealing with individual specific cases as well. So that's something that we will definitely look at. If there's an interest in that, then please do contact ASCC to think about how we might do that. We're thinking about doing a daily story time online. We're trying to work out what time that would be. Potentially that's 8:15 or 8:30 in the morning. I know that's early, but I was going to put myself forward to do that. So that would be weekdays 8:15 to 8:30. If there's interest in that, we're going to go through some sort of book. Of course, it would be a book, a classic book, and something like Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or other stories which have quite good morals, quite good and strong characters that things can get engaged in, and then maybe develop some play from there. So again, if there's an interest in that, please express your interest to it so that we can gauge one, if it's going to be useful, and also what time people would like to do that. Okay, so inshallah, I hope that's useful for people. It's a kind of whistle-stop tour. There's loads of stuff that can be looked into in child development. Please, please, please do invest time in yourself to think about what you can develop for yourself, but for others as well. It's an unprecedented time. Most people right now do have time, so do take that time to use well. Okay, thank you all very much for dialing in, and inshallah, maybe we'll see you again soon. All right, shukran. Thank you.